I'm about to read to you Diary of a Wimpy Kid, The Meltdown. Everybody in my neighborhood is outside today enjoying warm weather and sunshine. Well, everyone except me. It's kind of hard to enjoy a heat wave when it's the middle of the winter. People are calling this a wacky weather, but it just doesn't feel right. My old fashioned, maybe I'm old fashioned, but I think it should be cold weather, winter, and hot in the summer. I've heard of the whole planet is warming up and that human beings are the reason, but don't blame me because I just got here. If the world is getting hotter, I just hope it doesn't happen too fast because things keep up at this rate. I'll be riding a camel to school. They say the ice caps are melting and the sea is rising, so I've been trying to convince my mom and dad to buy a house higher up the hill, but they just don't seem that all concerned. It kind of makes me nervous that I'm the only one in my family worried about this stuff. Because if we don't do something about the situation soon, we're gonna wish we did. It's not just the rising sea levels. I'm nervous about those ice caps. I've been around for millions of years, and there all be things buried inside of them that should stay that way. I saw a movie about a caveman who got frozen in ice, and when it melted thousands of years later, he was still alive. I don't know if that kind of thing could actually happen in real life, but there are unfrozen cavemen walking around these days. The night janitor at my school might be one of them. If we do figure out a way out of this climate mess, it's probably going to be someone from my generation who solves it. That's why I'm always nice to the smart kids because they're the ones who are going to say robots. Whatever the answer is, I guarantee you technology is going to be the key. Grown ups are always saying that too much technology is bad for kids, but I say more the better. In fact, as soon as I can afford one of those high tech toilets that learn our habits, I'm gonna get the most expensive model. Some people worry that one day I'll lose control of technology and robots will take over. Well, if that happens, I'll make sure I'm on their side. I've actually been preparing for one of the robots to take over my sucking up the appliances in my house. So when there's a giant robot human war in the future, I'll be patting myself on the back for thinking ahead. My brother Roderick says that in the future people will have robots, body parts, and we'll all be cyborgs. Well, I hope I don't have to wait too long for that because if I could buy myself a pair of robot legs, I could get a half hour on extra sleep each morning. I guess we don't really know what's going to happen in the future, and you could drive yourself crazy worrying about it. Even if we solve all the problems we have right now, some new thing will come along and then we'll have to deal with that. I've read that once that that's what happened with the dinosaurs. They're riding high for a couple 100 million years and then asteroid came and wiped them out. What's really crazy is that cockroaches were around back then and somehow they survived. And they'll probably be here long after we're gone too. Personally, I think cockroaches are disgusting, but they must be doing something right. Speaking of survival right now, I'm just trying to get through middle school, and the last few days haven't been all that great. Even though it's warm outside, the thermostat at school still thinks it's winter, so furnace is on full blast all day, which makes it hard to concentrate in class. And it's worse in the cafeteria because there aren't any windows you can open to get fresh air. The heat has been frying my brain. I've been forgetting when my school assignments are due. I forgot a really big one today, which was my country project for that international showcase. Back in November, everyone had to choose a country to do a report on. I picked Italy because I'm a huge pizza fan, but it turns out Italy was a really popular choice. So my social studies teacher had to do a random drawing to decide who got it, and she chose Dennis Traction, which isn't fair because he is lactose intolerant and can't even eat cheese. So the teacher assigned me Malta, which I didn't even know was a country. Anyway, that was 2 months back, and I didn't even give my country project a second thought until today. And the only reason I remember it was because when I got to school, everyone was wearing weird clothes. I probably should realize it was International Showcase Day when my friend Raleigh came by to get me for school wearing a crazy getup, but he's always doing strange stuff, so I barely even notice. I'm in homeroom. I took a look at Riley's project to see how much work was involved, and that's when I started to panic. His report looked like it took a ton of time, and it was pretty obvious his parents helped him with it. Of course, Riley had actually been to the country he got assigned, so I'm sure that made it a lot easier for him. I've asked Riley to be a pal and switch countries with me, but he's kind of selfish, so he wouldn't go for it. That meant I was on my own, and I only had a few hours to do my whole project from scratch, and I didn't know where I was going to find a trifold this late in the game. That's when I remembered that I had a trifold in my locker. I had started my country project the day after it was assigned so I could get ahead of things for once. But when I pulled it out to see how far I've gotten, I was pretty disappointed. This project was 50% of my social studies grade, so I was desperate. I tried getting help from my classmates, but all they did was remind me I need to get some smarter friends. I stayed indoors for a recess to work on my project. I didn't have time to go down to the library for research, so I had to do a lot of guessing. The only thing I felt pretty sure about was the Malta was near Russia, but I was shaky on everything else. Once I finished filling out my trifold, I started working on the other stuff. We were supposed to wear our country's traditional dress for the international showcase. So on the way to lunch, I picked out some clothes from Lost and Found in front of my principal's office. Luckily, there were a few decent items in the box, and I put together an outfit that looked pretty convincing. Everyone was supposed to bring a traditional meal too at lunch. I thought my as many items as I could afford. I threw something together that seemed like I might have come from another country. The international showcase was during the last period, and when I set up my project in the gym, I was actually feeling pretty good about things, but I wish I'd gotten assigned a country where there were lighter clothes because the furnace was still on full blast. The heat was getting to some other kids too, and the tempers were starting to flare. At one point, Brazil and Bolivia got into a fight over table space, and a teacher had to come and break it up. Kids came in from elementary school to check out the projects and ask questions, but all I had to do to get them to move along was pretend I spoke Maltese. After that, the parents started to arrive. Luckily, mine couldn't come because dad was at work and mom was at her college. But some kid in my grade has a mom and dad who are actually from Malta, which was really bad luck for me. I thought they were going to report me to my teacher and I was ready to make a run for it, but then something happened that got me off the hook. The fight that started between Brazil and Bulgaria flared back up and spilled over the C and D countries, and before long, the whole gym was at war. Luckily, the bell rang and the school got dismissed before anyone could seriously hurt. But the whole situation doesn't exactly give me a lot of hope for the world peace. Well, I thought I was in the clear, but I was wrong. My social studies teacher sent a note home to my parents that said I have to do my international showcase project again. So my mom said I can't watch TV or play video games until I finish. I figured I could probably get this thing done by Saturday, but it wouldn't matter anyway. That's because my mom is making me and my brothers have screen-free weekends. Mom thinks it's us kids are addicted to electronics and they're the reason we misbehave. So she started this one policy where we're not allowed to use any electronics on Saturday and Sundays, and we have to find other ways to entertain ourselves. What really stinks is that when mom catches us behaving on the weekends, she thinks it's proof that screen-free weekends are working. So lately, me and my Roderick have been remembering to misbehave on Saturdays and Sundays so mom doesn't think her no electronic policy is working. And Manny joins in too because I guess he likes to do whatever his big brothers are doing. Mom says kids these days don't know how to interact with one another because we're always staring at our screens. So she's been working with me and Roderick on our social skills. One thing mom's always trying to get me to do is look her in the eyes when I'm talking to her. I can do that for a little while, but after a few seconds it just gets too weird. The latest thing mom's been making me do is practice shaking hands with dad, but that's awkward for both of us. Mom wants me to branch out and make more friends in the neighborhood, but I'm already friends with Raleigh and he's all I can really handle right now. Even though there are tons of kids in my street, I really can't see being friends with any of them. I already feel like making an exception for Raleigh, and the options go downhill from there. Our house is halfway up Sarah Street, and Raleigh's house is near the top. Sometimes it's a pain to even go see him because I have to pass by Fragley's house to do it, and 9 times out of the 10, Fragley is hanging out in his front yard. Across the street from Fragley is Jacob Hoff, but he almost never comes out because his parents are always making him practice the clarinet. And on either side of Jacob and Ernesto Garrides and Gabrielle Johns, who are in my grade. Ernesto and Gabrielle are nice kids and all, but they both have bad breath, so those two are perfect for each other. 2 doors down from me is David Marsh, who's really into karate. His best friends with Joseph and Rokes, who's always doing something to get himself injured. Next door is Joseph and is Mitchell Pickett, who makes a killing selling permanent snowballs in the winter, and marks my words, one day kids can be a millionaire. Mitchell lives next door to a boy 1 year younger than me who obviously everybody calls speed a bump, but people steer clear of him because his 2 older brothers are already in jail. There's a kid named Privis Gentry who has a tree house in his backyard and he spends his summers solving neighborhood crimes, but most of the time the person who's responsible is speed bump. There's a duplex 3/4 of the way down the hill, and the two families who live in it hate each other. I can never keep the kids in that house straight, but I know of them is named Jano because he has a tattoo on his arm, even though he's only like 7 years old. There's a boy who lives with his grandmother a few doors down, and his name is Gibson. Everyone calls him Baby Gibson because no matter how much time goes by, he never seems to get any older. For all I know, Baby Gibson is 32 years old and he's got kids of his own. There's a play group of preschoolers that gets together twice a week in Mrs. Jameson's house. I don't know which kids are hers and which are her friends, What I do know is that those kids are totally out of control, and the moms don't really seem to care. There are some older kids on our street too. Anthony Dinard is a sophomore in high school, and he's just started shaving, but he got carried away with the razor blade and accidentally shaved off one of his eyebrows. Anthony drew it back on with a brown marker, but he didn't do a good job, and now one half of his face always looks surprised. Anthony's best friend is Sheldon Reyes, who tried to make money plowing the neighbors' driveways the first time it snowed this winter. But Sheldon doesn't have his license yet, and he did a lot of damage to the neighborhood before his dad found out his son is using his truck. A few doors down from me are the Cars twins, Jeremy and Jameson, who made up their own language when they were taller, and when those two are together, no one can understand a word they say. There are a bunch of girls on my street too, but they're just as bad as the guys. The Marley sisters live across from Rowley's house, and all five of them were born within a few years of each other. I don't know what their deal is, but those girls will just randomly attack people who come into their yard. Amelia Greenwood lives in a few doors down from Marley's sister. Amelia always dresses like a princess. I think she's too many. I think she's seen too many Disney movies. Latricia Hooks lives in the one-story house across from the duplex, and she's a 6'2" high school junior. Roderick won't go anywhere near Latricia because she used to bully him when he was my age. Latricia's sister Victoria is in love with Ernesto Guardias for some reason, and Victoria's best friend Evelyn Trimble dresses like a vampire. In fact, I'm pretty sure Evelyn thinks she is a vampire, which is one reason I'm glad I don't ride the bus anymore. I haven't even mentioned half of the kids who live on my hill, but if I went down the whole list, it'd take forever. Mom always asks me why I'm not friends with the kids at the bottom of the hill, even though I've told her a million times why that never happened. Surrey Street is divided into two halves. There's Upper Surrey Street, which is the hill, and Lower Surrey Street, which is the flat part of the bottom. And even though we all live on the same street, the hill kids and non-hill kids can't stand one another. Living on the hill is no fun. First of all, it's really far from the school, and that last stretch at the end of the day is no joke, especially when it's hot like it's been lately. The worst thing about living on the hill is there's not a lot of you can do on it, and if you want to play with a ball, you can forget about it. But the kids who live at the bottom of the hill have it made. Their part of the street is flat, so they can do anything they want down there. That's why all the athletes come from Lower Surrey Street. The thing is, kids who live at the bottom of our street think they own it, and if any of us hill people come down there to play, the Lower Surrey Street kids won't let us. In fact, the reason it took me 4 years to learn to ride a bike was because I had to do it in 5 second spurts. But when it snows, the tables are turned. All of a sudden, the Lower Street kids want to use our hill for sledding, but that's when we gave the guys a taste of their own medicine. Most of the time, we can keep the Lower Surrey Street kids off the hill, but they're sneaky, and sometimes they slip past us. Last winter, a bunch of Lower Surrey Street kids had bought the same winter gear as the Hill kids, and it was weeks before any of us caught on. If you live on Surrey Street, you either Hill kid or a non-Hill kid, and there's no switching sides. There's a kid named Trevor Nix who lived on the hill until last summer, which is when his family moved to a bigger house at the bottom of the street. But the kids down there still consider Trevor Hill Hill person, so they won't let him play on the street, as Hill kids think of him as a traitor for moving, and we won't let him sled in the winter. So now Trevor is basically stuck indoors year round. There's a lot of bad blood between the Upper Surrey Street kids and Lower Surrey Street kids. When it, which is why we can't be friends. But whenever I try to explain the situation to Mom, she just doesn't get it. In fact, none of the moms on our street do. They're all friends with each other, and they have no clue about what's really going on. Lately, though, things have been pretty calm on our street. Us Hill kids keep to our side, and the other guys keep to theirs. But but if someone does something stupid, the whole place is gonna blow. The temperature dropped about 15 degrees over the weekend, so today family was out looking for a pet pig. For Christmas vacation, my family went away and we left the pig in a kennel, but I guess the pig thought it should have come with us, and it wasn't too happy about being left behind. When we got back home, the pig let us know how it felt about being included in our family vacation. After a few days, the pig acting out, Dad decided enough was enough, and he sent it to obedience school. But the next morning, we got a call from a lady who runs the place, and she said her pig escaped. We've been putting up signs asking for help finding our lost pig ever since. But that thing is so smart, so I don't think it's lost. It just doesn't want to be found. I figured the pig was probably off hibernating somewhere. Mom says pigs don't do that, but you ask me, I think it should. They should. If I was an animal, that's exactly what I'd be doing right now. On the last day of the fall, I think everyone should get their pajamas and check out until the spring. When I was younger, I actually tried hibernate, but it didn't work. I used to get super excited for Christmas, and once December rolled around, it was really hard for me to wait until the big day. So one year on December 1st, I told my parents I was gonna go to sleep and that they shouldn't wake me up until Christmas morning. I was pretty surprised when they didn't put up the fight. I went to bed that night, but I only slept until 1:30 p.m. the next day. Then my sleep schedule was screwed up for the next 2 weeks. Mom says it's impossible for human beings to hibernate, but I'm not 100% convinced that's true. There's this group of wild kids who live in the woods, and everyone calls them Mingos. You never see the Mingos in the winter, and when they make their first appearance in the spring, they look like they just woke up. So if they're not hibernating, I don't know what they're doing all winter. The rest of the normal people have to grin it out and deal with cold weather. And the only way to do that is to stay inside as much as possible and keep warm. When we got back from our trip a few weeks ago, there was a package on our front step. It was a Christmas gift from Aunt Dorothy, and when we opened it, there was a giant blanket inside. The thing was amazing. It was really soft, but it was also heavy, which is exactly how I like my blankets. The only problem was that the gift was for all three of us boys, and we started fighting over it right away. We wanted to use the blanket at the same time, so Mom told us we were going to have to take turns with it. But the three of us have never been any good at sharing, so Mom had to make a blanket schedule that spelled out who got to use it when. But that wasn't really fair. Manny has his own blanket, so he was double dipping. When it was my turn to use the blanket, I tried to make the most of it. But it was really hard to enjoy myself because Roderick would start hovering over me when I was still had 15 minutes left on my shift. We each got 3 half-an-hour shifts a night, but Roderick would cheat Minnie out of his turn by taking the blanket into the bathroom right before Minnie's shift was supposed to start. Then Roderick would sit in there for an hour, which cut out into my shift. So Minnie made Mom made a rule that we can't take the blanket into the bathroom. One night I slept with the blanket in my room, and Roger complained because he wanted to use it while he ate breakfast. Mom made a new rule that said if you slept with the blanket, it had to be returned downstairs by 8 a.m. By the end of the first week, there was many rules that Mom had to put them all in the manual, which ended up being something like 25 pages long. But that didn't solve our problem, and eventually Mom took the blanket away to give it to someone who deserved it. She said it was our fault we couldn't have something nice because we didn't know how to share, and grown-ups are always talking about how great sharing is, but personally, I think it's overrated, and if I ever got enough money, I'm gonna build a big castle for myself, and there's gonna be a big heavy blanket in every room. When I woke up this morning, it was below freezing outside. I was relieved it actually felt like winter again, but when Mom told me I had to wear thermal underwear to school, I thought maybe global warming isn't such a bad thing after all. I hate wearing thermal underwear because it's uncomfortable. I was feeling ridiculous wearing it. Thermal underwear looks cool when it's on the mannequin at the mall, but when I put it on, I just look like a retired superhero. The mannequins at the mall are always super buff, and they make guys like me who can't spend 3 hours in the gym every day look bad. If I never get in really good shape, I'm gonna sign up to be a mannequin model because that would be an awesome thing to brag about on our date. The mannequins you see at the sports store are always in athlete poses, and it looks like it would be hard to stay in that position while someone sculpts you, and that's just too much effort for a job that should be easy. So when I apply for a job, I'm gonna do it at Bed and Bath Store. Mom says I'm lucky to have thermal underwear because our ancestors didn't have the kind of stuff to keep them warm. So sometimes I wonder about my ancestor. I thought, though, I have no idea why they chose to live here when they could have picked somewhere a whole lot warmer. But I can't complain because the they survive, and everything they did led directly to me. I just wish they could see how I turned out so they know all their sacrifices were worth it. I guess we're all lucky to be here because human beings had to go through a lot to get to where they are now. At school, we learned that 10,000 years age, a big streak of ice covered half the planet, and if people made it through that, I guess we can get through anything. My teacher said that one day the Earth is going to be another ice age and glaciers will come back, but I hope it doesn't happen anytime soon. I've heard glaciers move slowly, which is a good thing because maybe we'll have a chance to do something about it. I don't know which is worse, a planet that's too hot or one that's too cold. All I know that today it was cold. It wasn't fun walking to school in the morning. I tried to cheer myself up thinking of things I like about winter, but I came up with a really short list. Christmas is great and all, but after that, it's just a long slog to spring. I've decided the only thing that actually makes winter worth it is the hot chocolate. I used to be on the safety patrols and I get free hot chocolate at school, but after I got kicked off, I had to start bringing my own. Lately, I've been filling a thermos with a hot chocolate every morning, and that keeps me warm on the walk to school. But today, Dad must have grabbed my thermos and left me with his, and I didn't realize that had happened until I took a great gulp of cream of mushroom soup. I wish Mom and Dad would drive me to school in the morning, but they leave a half hour before I do. There are some kids in my hill whose parents drive them on cold days like today, but when me and Raleigh tried to flag them down to hitch a ride, they wouldn't even make eye contact, and that really stinks because us hill kids are supposed to have each other's backs. It was so cold out today, the teachers decided to keep us indoors for recess, which was perfectly fine for me. The last time we had outdoor recess on a day like today, Sandy was saying it was too cold that your spit would freeze before it hit the ground. Well, it turns out he was wrong, and recess that day was a total nightmare. Usually indoors wasn't recess isn't very fun. We're supposed to play board games and do arts and crafts, but kids always get restless and find ways to liven things up. So today our teacher said we're gonna try something new. She taught us she taught us how to play a game called Museum, where everyone has to freeze like a statue and hold still for as long as possible. It was actually pretty fun, but when recess ended, I realized I was just on an easy way to get us to behave for half an hour. The thing I don't like about being indoors at school in the winter is that a lot of kids are sick, and I really don't want someone getting me sick. Our school is full of germs, and nobody covers their mouth when they cough or sneeze. Walking down the hallway between classes is like walking through a war zone. Nobody remembers to sneeze into the crook of their arm, and kids like Albert, Sandy aren't helping things. Today at lunch, Albert told a story about a guy who covered his sneeze, and when he did, he blew his head clean off. I told Albert his story wasn't true, but he swore it was. He said the guy actually survived, and now he works as a grocery bagger at the local shop in Dash. Albert's always spreading bad information like that, and the kids at my table believe every word he says. So now there's zero chance any of these guys will cover their mouths next time they have to sneeze. A couple weeks ago, Albert said that when someone's pet dies in the winter, they have to wait until the ground thaws in the spring before it can be buried. He said they need somewhere to keep their pets in the meantime. Albert said the people in our town use the school cafeteria walk-in freezer to store their pets for the winter, and that right now it's full of cap capacity. I'm always positive this is just another one of Albert's stupid made-up stories, but until we find a pig, not I'm not gonna order the pork barbecue special just in case. I'm seriously thinking of changing lunch tables because I'm tired of sitting with Albert, Sandy, and all these other idiots every day. One kid I won't miss is Teddy Savini, who wears the same sweater all winter long. Teddy's sweater has never been clean, and there are food stains all over it. Sometimes the kid at my table tries to guess what each stain is, which is what they were doing today. See, this is the reason girls at my school have pictures of pop singers in their lockers. The guys in my grade just aren't giving them any good options. I can't even imagine how many germs are on Teddy's sweater, which is why I sit at least 2 seats away from him. Most of my brain power at the school goes to keeping tabs on whose germs are where, and I've already filled up 2 notebooks this winter. The times it gets tricky is when you have twins like Jeremy and James and Garza. I can't tell them apart, and today it looked to me like one was sick, but the other wasn't. So I shot a spitball at the sick one's hair to make it easier to keep track of him. The only good thing about being sick is the cherry lozenges Mom gives me when I have a sore throat. I know you're supposed to suck on them real slow, but I chew those things like candy, and I can go through a few packs a day. The girls in my grade love the smell of cherry lozenges, which almost makes being sick worth it. Unfortunately, the guys in my grade like the smell too, and they're always trying to get me to give them some. A few weeks ago, I thought I felt a sore throat coming on, and I brought 3 packs of cherry lozenges to school with me. I kept 1 pack in my pocket and the other 2 in the locker, but Jake McGraw sniffed out the packs I was keeping in my locker, and by the time I found out, Speed Bump had already picked the lock. I wish I didn't have to go to school at all during cold and flu seasons. Maybe one day I'll be one of those big plastic bubbles, so I'm not supposed to other exposed to other kids' germs. But I'm sure my bubble wouldn't last a day before some jerk popped it. Even though I hate being sick, I'm kind of glad they haven't came up with a cure for the cold yet. Because if they did, I wouldn't be able to fake being sick, stay home from school to play video games. It was even colder today on the walk home than it was on the walk to school. And this time, me and Riley were facing the wind, which made 10 times worse. It was so bad that we had to make a few pit stops on the way home. First place we ducked, it was the pizza shop because there was a big oven there, so it's always warm out inside. But when the guy who owns the place realized we were gonna buy anything, he kicked us out. Our next stop was the town library. That's a public building, and I knew that they couldn't tell us to leave, but when the librarian started getting pushy with the books, we left on our own. I wish we'd used the bathroom in the library before we Headed back outside though because when I got halfway home, Riley was needed to go. We knocked on a few doors, but when people saw us, they pretended they were home. We finally got someone to answer, but by that point, Riley's face was frozen. He couldn't even form words. By the time we got to Surrey Street, I thought Riley was gonna have a medical emergency, but I knew none of the lower Surrey Street people were gonna let us inside their house. There's a big rock in Mr. Yee's front yard, and I told Riley he should duck behind it to do his business. Personally, I wouldn't pee outside in this kind of cold because Albert Senney told us the story about what happened to a guy who did. But I didn't feel like it was the right time to mention that rally. And I'm not really sure he had to go number one anyway. Whatever he was doing back there, he was taking forever. Some Lower Street kids came out to their house to play, and before long, Riley had drawn a crowd. I just backed off because I really didn't want people to know what was with him. Thankfully, Raleigh wrapped up things up and we got out of there before anyone realized what we was doing. Because this is just sort of a stupid thing that could end up sparking a war. It was seriously cold again this morning, so I dug a scarf and a pair of old gloves out of the closet. Mom said I should wear the mittens Grandma knitted for me last winter, but when she made those things, she forgot to add the thumbs. So whenever I put them on, it's basically like wearing socks on my hands, and they're totally useless in a snowball fight. Mom said I should wear earmuffs too, but the thing I've learned is that if kids know you can't hear them coming, they're just asking for it. The reason I get so cold is because I'm skinny and I any have any insulation. Every winter I try to eat a lot of to give myself an extra layer of blubber, but I guess I've got a fast metabolism because nothing I ever do seems to work. I think it was something like 10 degrees outside this morning, and on the walk to school, I started wondering if a person's blood could freeze. I've heard people are something like 60 water, so I guess it's possible, but it kind of feels like something Albert Sandy would make up. What was I worried about most of frostbite? The most was frostbite. By the time I was halfway to school, my ears were stinging, and I really wish I listened to my mom about earmuffs. I thought one of my ears might actually fall off, and I wouldn't notice until I was in class. It wasn't just my ears I was worried about though. Apparently there are a lot of body parts where you can get frostbite. I wouldn't want to lose my nose because I look a little freaky without one. Then again, my desk in social studies is right next to the bathroom, so at least that situation would get a little better. Plus, my nose always runs on cold days, and I never realize I've got frozen shot on my face until it's too late. I like to hang out to my I like to hang on my lips too because if I didn't have them, it would always look like I was smiling, and in certain situations that could be a real problem. I was lucky I found those gloves because I wouldn't want to lose my fingers either. The only thing I'd been willing to give up would be pinky toes because I hardly ever use mine. The last time I can remember using them was when I was in preschool and I needed to count a 20 to 20. But other than that, a I'm drawing a blank. I guess a lot of other kids were worried about frostbite too, because when I got to school, there was a whole line of boys in the bathroom waiting to use the hand dryer, and that made me 5 minutes late for first period. It wasn't as windy as the walk home today, but it was just as cold. Me and Riley stopped at the pizza place again to warm up because Riley found a coupon for a free meatball sub for two free meatball subs in his coat pocket. After we left the pizza shop, we still had a long way to walk, but that's when I had an idea. Grandma's house is halfway between our school and Surrey Street, and I knew there was one home. That's because that's because Grandma goes down south each winter and doesn't come back until spring. During the winter, Grandma sends us pictures of herself and her friends in their bathing bathing suits to let us know that she's having a good time. Grandma takes her dog, Sweetie, with her too. So while I'm freezing my butt off here, it's great to know Sweetie's lying on a beach down south, soaking up in the sun. Grandma usually keeps a key inside the garden gone right next to the front door. I'm sure enough that it's exactly where it was today. I figured we could use Grandma's house to warm up before the last push home. Riley was nervous about us going inside with no adults home, but I told him Grandma's family and she'd want me to use her house while she was away. When we walked in, I was pretty surprised. It was like a icebox in there. So I guess Grandma turned down the thermostat for the winter. Usually, Grandma cranks the heat when she's home. It's so warm that you eat your ice cream sandwich with the freezer drawer open, or the ice cream will melt in your hands. The first thing I did when we got inside, Grandma was turned up the thermostat. It was taking a while for the house to heat up. So I turned the oven and we warmed up in a hurry. Grandma had a bunch of snacks in her refrigerator, and me and Riley helped ourselves, but while we were eating, we saw a movement out the front window. It was Mr. McNeil, Grandma's snooping next door neighbor. She must have noticed the light from the fridge, and now she was trying to see inside. We stayed out of sight, and eventually Mrs. McNeil went away. But now I knew we had to be careful because I really didn't need her calling the cops. So we got down low and went into the living room where Grandma's house has her TV. Grandma has all the cable channels, and luckily she didn't shut those down for the winter. But we could risk attracting Mrs. McNeil again, so we put a blanket over ourselves and the television and watched it that way. I guess we kind of lost track of time because when we shut off the TV, it was dark out by now, and it was nice and toasty at Grandma's house. And I really didn't want to go back out there in this cold, so I had an idea for how to make the walk home a little more comfortable. I figured if we warm up our clothes in Grandma's dryer before we head back out, it would take the edge off for the rest of the trip. So we went down to the basement where Grandma keeps her laundry machines and put our loads of clothes. We set the timer to 30 minutes and waited, but it was a little awkward hanging out in our underwear while the dryer did its thing. Plus, it was cold in the basement, so we looked around for something to wear. Riley found a sweatshirt I gave Grandma for her birthday, and he put that on, but I didn't feel right wearing Grandma's clothes. I found a sweater that Grandma knitted for Sweetie, and it fit better than I expected, but it was a little itchy, and I couldn't remember if Sweetie ever had fleas. But while I was looking around for something to swap it with, we heard noise upstairs. My first thought was that Grandma gave Mrs. McNeil a cue to the house, and now she was inside. But Raleigh said it might be a burglar who knew no one was home, and I thought maybe he was right. We heard some more stomping around upstairs, and when the door to the basement opened, we both freaked out. I looked around for something to use to defend myself, but the best I could come up with was a toilet plunger. Raleigh grabbed a can of lemon dust spray and one of Grandma's purses, and when we heard footsteps coming down the stairs, we braced ourselves. The footsteps paused when they got near the bottom, and that's when we made our move. It turned out it wasn't Mrs. McNeil, and it wasn't a burglar either. It was Mom. She was there to do a load of laundry since our washing machine at home is broken. Mom didn't say much. She just told us to get our winter clothes back on and get in the car, and it was totally silent on the ride back to our neighborhood, which was really awkward. I figured as soon as Riley was out of the car, Mom was going to yell at me for being at Grandma's house without permission, but she didn't say anything, and she didn't mention it to Dad during dinner either. After I finished doing the dishes, Mom told me she wanted to have a talk with me in our room. She said it was pretty perfectly normal for boys our age to play make believe, and that there was nothing to feel ashamed of. Then she said she was glad me and Riley were using our imaginations instead of playing video games. I have no idea what my mom thought we were doing in Grandma's basement, but to be honest with you, I kind of wish she had just grounded me instead. It's been snowing for the past few days, and last night we got another inch and a half. Unfortunately, that wasn't enough to close school, and even if it snowed more than that, I don't think they would have given us the day off. We only we only get a certain amount of snow days each year, and if we use them all, then we have to make up for the during summer vacation, and we've already burned through most of our snow days for the winter, even though some of them technically weren't used because of snow. In December, the school shut down for 3 days because of a lice epidemic. What happened was the Lily Bonder came to school with his head lice, but I guess he didn't know it, and it spread when she took pictures with her friends. So if we were sitting in a hot classroom in July, I guess we can all thank Lily for taking selfies. Sometimes when it snows in the morning, they'll give us a half day, but I'm not a big fan of half days because we still have to walk all that way just to put a few hours at school. What really stinks is when the school looks at the weather forecast and decides in advance the next day it's going to be a half day. On a half day, the school schedule is the same, but everything takes half the time that goes for detention too, and all the bullies in our school know if they do something bad the day before a half day, they'll only get half punishment. Sometimes school gets canceled because it's supposed to snow, and then it doesn't. That's because the school relies on our local TV weatherman for the forecast, and he's wrong at least 50% of the time. On New Year's Eve, he said it was gonna be t-shirt and short weathers the next day, but then it snowed 3 inches. And when people saw him at the grocery store, they let him know they were happy. Honestly, I don't see how this guy still has a job, but I guess as long as people like my parents tune in every night, he's not going anywhere. I couldn't find one of my gloves this morning, so I looked for a replacement. I was already running late, so the best I could come up with was a puppet mom bought to try and get me to eat healthy food when I was younger. I guess mom thought I was Mr. Morals, like vegetables that I would too, but I used Mr. Morals to eat my vegetables. And when I found him today in the closet, I still had stains on his face. He still had stains on his face from the peas I wouldn't touch in the second grade. I know it's kind of ridiculous to wear a puppet as a glove, and I mostly remember to keep that thing tucked in my coat pocket on the walk to school. But when Casey Drentz rolled by in her mom's car, I totally forgot Mr. Moles was still in my hand. Speaking of girls, there's been a big change to the safety patrols in the past few weeks. There used to be a lot of boys on the patrols, but quiet most of them are quiet or got kicked off before the start of the new year. The last two boys on the patrols were Eric Reynolds and Dougie Finch, who were both captains, but they had their badges taken away in the first week of January when they got into a snowball fight in the front of the kindergarten classroom at the elementary school. So now the safe patrols are 100% girls, and I'll bet they've been planning to take over for a while. The reason is because the guys at my school can be real jerks, and when it snows, they're really bad. After a while, I'm sure the girls got sick of it, and that's why they put themselves in charge. None Now that the girls are in power, they're not messing around. If you throw a single snowball on a school day, the safety patrols will report you to the principal, and you will get an automatic suspension. So the girls are just praying on one of the guys will step out of line. Today the road was clear, but the sidewalk wasn't. Whenever that happens, me and Riley just walk and rode. But these new safety patrols are sticklers for the rules, and they won't let us walk in the street even though they do it. But it's practically impossible to walk on the sidewalk when it hasn't been plowed, especially when people are clearing the driveways. In fact, it's hard to even know where the sidewalk is, and this morning I almost busted a kneecap on a fire hydrant that was buried in a snow draft. The thing that really stinks is that the safety patrols make all us guys walk on the sidewalk, but they let the girls walk on the road. When me and Riley got to school today, we were totally wiped out from the trip, but the girls in our class were fresh and ready to go. And if one of them goes to be president, it's because they got an unfair advantage back in middle school. I don't really blame the safety patrols for sticking it to the guys in my grade, but most boys are basically savages, and they make civilized guys like me look bad. But with this new safety patrol situation, I've been thinking there's might be a way for me to separate myself from those fools. If can work for the safety patrols, I can stay on their good side. And if I report the troublemakers to the girls, then they'll owe me. For some reason, though, snitching is really frowned in my school. And if you tell a kid for doing something wrong, then everyone says you're a telltale, and it's hard to recover from that. But from what I can tell, the only people the no snitching thing helps are the bullies. I'm sure though the ones who came up with the idea in the first place. Personally, I don't have any problem with snitching, and apparently you can make money off of being a telltale. Roderick told me about a guy in his high school who turned out to be a nair, which means the guy pretended to be a high schooler, but he was actually a cop in disguise. I've heard about the kind of thing before, and sometimes I wonder if there are nairs in middle school too. There's a new kid named Shane Browning who came to our school in middle of the year, and he looks a lot older than the rest of us. I'm starting to wonder if maybe he's in there. So I've been giving him the inside scoop on my classmates just in case he is. Anyway, the snow situation is causing a lot of problems. For the past few days, kids have been wearing their boots in school, and everyone tracks snow through the hallways. So today, the teachers made everyone take off their boots in the entry, but the snow on the boots melted and made a giant puddle. Then the kids walked through the puddle on their way to class, and before long, everyone's socks were soaked. One thing led to another, and by third period, it was just complete chaos in the hallways. It got so bad, the teachers had to collect all of our socks to keep them in the front office. But a bunch of barefoot middle schoolers isn't such a great thing either. At the end of the day, we all went to the front office to get our socks, but most of the socks looked the same, so no one could tell which ones belonged to who. Luckily, Jake McGo has a really good sense of smell, and he paired each kid up with their correct socks. He even got the socks right for the Garza twins, which you have to admit is pretty impressive. I was glad it was a little warmer on the way home today, since me and Riley didn't have Grandma's house to use as a pit stop, but that didn't mean the walk home was easy. You're not allowed to throw snowballs on the way home from school, but after you get home, you can do anything you want. So kids who live close to the school have figured out if they drop their bags off at the house, they count that counts as being home. Then they come after the kids like me and Raleigh who still have a long way walk. The safe patrols get ambushed too, but rules are rules, and they're not allowed to fight back. And they get attacked from both sides. Some of the kids on my hill who get rides from walk halfway back to school just get to their licks in. It's supposed to snow another few inches tomorrow. I told my parents that I'm saving up for a snowmobile, so I'm getting to school. School isn't such a hassle on days like today. But mom and dad started listing all the reasons why a middle school kid can't have a snowmobile, and after a while, I kind of tuned them out. Anytime I came up with a good idea, my parents shoot it down. They did the same exact thing when I had a dog sled idea last winter. I figured I, if I bought a few dogs and trained them to pull a sled getting to school in the morning would be a snap. I guess my parents thought I was joking though because they told me I should go for it. But when I used my Christmas money to buy a litter of puppies from the lady up the street, mom and dad made me return every last one. Today reminded me why the winter is my least favorite time of the year. It was another snowy day, but this morning I decided to do something extra preparation to stay warm. On the way to school, Dad lit a fire before he left for work, and I figured that I could use it to warm up my coat and boots before I put them on. But I put my boots too close to the fire, and the rubber soles melted into the bricks. So when it was time to go, they wouldn't budge. Raleigh was coming by to get me at any minute, so I had to figure out something else to wear on my feet. I knew the safe patrols wouldn't let us walk in the street, and my sneakers were gonna get soaked if I had to walk through the snow. So I created my own snowshoes out of pizza boxes and duct tape. And by the time Raleigh knocked on the door, I was ready to go. I've got to say, my snowshoes worked even better than I expected. In fact, I was moving along so fast, Raleigh had trouble keeping up with me. But once we got to the bottom of the Surrey Street, things fell apart. The boxes got soggy, and I started sinking into the snow. And then it was even worse than having sneakers on because now I was dragging these wet boxes along with me. I knew this wasn't working, so I had Raleigh try to help me pull up boxes off my sneakers, but it was practically impossible because they were double wrapped in duct tape. Unfortunately, we were right at the edge of Guzman's yard, and they've got about 11 dogs, and the dogs were curious about what we were doing, and that wasn't helping things. Then the dogs got aggressive and started fighting over the pizza boxes. That's when I remembered there were a few slices of pizza still in them. The dogs chewed up the pizza boxes, and thankfully they didn't take off my feet. We got out of there as quick as we could, but my sneakers were getting soaked in the snow. The second I stepped into the street, though the safety patrols were right there with their whistles, so I had to just suck it up and walk on the sidewalk. It didn't take long for the cold to set in. I was worried I could lose my toes if I didn't find a way to warm them up, but the school was still a long way off, and I was desperate. So I stopped every few houses, and I shoved my feet into a dry vent until I got the feeling back in my toes. We finally made it to school, but it took me a minute to realize it was almost as cold in there as it was outside. Apparently, what happened was that the sock smell from yesterday was so strong that it was too much for the night janitor. So he went around and opened all the windows to let some fresh air circulate. But then he forgot to close the windows at the end of his shift, and the furnace couldn't keep it up, so it shut down. That meant we had to the whole day of school with no heat. At first, the teachers let us wear our winter stuff in class, but I guess that was too weird, so they changed their minds and made us put our gear in lockers. In history, we were freezing, but our teacher was just fine. Mrs. Billy keeps a space heater next to her desk, and she had that thing cranked up to max. Halfway through class, a girl named Becky Cosgrove tipped over her net, tipped over her desk, and started yelling, which was totally random. As punishment, Mrs. Willie made Becky sit in a chair next to her desk, and it took a minute for the rest of us to figure out what Becky's game was. But kids in middle school are idiots, and within 30 seconds, everyone is trying to get a seat next to Mrs. Willie. For the rest of the day, everybody did whatever they could to keep warm, and some kids got pretty creative about it. We had a school play a few weeks ago, and somebody had a bright idea to get one of the costumes from behind the stage. While most of us were freezing our butts off inside, the snow was really piling up outside. And by fourth period, people were freaking out that we were gonna be stuck at the school overnight. At lunch, kids bought up everything in the cafeteria so they have something to eat if they got snowed in. That sent everyone else into a panic, so kids made a run on the vending machines in the hallways. At that point, people were just trying to get their hands on anything that it was edible. A rumor spread there was food in the science lab, so a bunch of kids ran down there. And from what I've heard, they picked that place clean. I think the principal could see that she was about to have a riot on her hands, so she announced an early dismissal. Well, that was great news for everyone who rode the bus home, but us kids who had to walk didn't have it easy. I really look forward to walking home in a snowstorm, so I came up with an idea. Really Street isn't too far from our neighborhood, so I figured me and Riley could ride their bus and walk the rest of the way. So after we got dismissed, we headed straight for the bus line, and we were so bummed up nobody even noticed when we got on board. I've got to say, it was kind of weird being on the bus with the really street kids, because those guys are the enemies. They use the sled on our hill every winter until they discovered the 13th hole in the golf course. 13th hole in the legendary and is legendary, and everyone knows it's the best sledding hill in our town. But the problem is that the golf course is part of the country's club, so if you sled there, you're trespassing. Last year, I wanted to see what the fuss was over the 13th hole was all about. So I got Relly to come with me, but Relly was super nervous about the trespassing thing, so he didn't want to go. I had to remind Relly that he and his family are members of the country club, so technically he wouldn't be trespassing, but I guess Relly was worried his family might lose their membership if he got caught sledding, so to excuse himself, he shook his face really fast and kept that up the whole time we were there. I've got to admit, the drifting hole was everything people said it was. It was really steep, and someone built up a mountain of snow near the bottom where the kids were catching some serious air. We've gotten a few good runs, but that's when the really street kids came and kicked everyone else off the golf course so they could have it to themselves. But I was okay with it, and as long as those guys aren't causing trouble on our street, they can have the whole golf course for all I care. But the bus ride with the Raleigh Street kids wasn't a lot of fun, but me and Raleigh just tried to keep a low profile so no one would notice us. We were almost to the Raleigh Street when one of the kids in the back did something really dumb, so Full actually threw a snowball on the bus. The second it happened, the driver pulled over. She said she wasn't moving until the person who threw the snowball turned themselves in. Like I said before, there is no snitching rule in middle school, so no one from the back of the bus made a peep. I wish I knew who did it because I would give them up in a heartbeat. I was pretty sure the bus driver was just bluffing about the move not moving, and we'd be on our way within a few minutes. But then she brought out a book and started to page one, so we just sat there and waited for an hour while she read. The worst part about the whole thing was that the bus driver turned off the engine so there was no heat. There was some conversation going on in the back of the bus, and I think a few kids were trying to get one who drew the snowball to give himself up. But I really wish I hadn't turned around and looked, because when I did, some eighth grader realized I wasn't from Raleigh Street. That was all it took. The guys needed someone to take the blame for the snowball, and since I was an outsider, it was a no-brainer for them. The bus driver said, "I need to get off this bus. Get off. You need to get off the bus immediately." That was fine with me, because now that my cover was blown, I didn't want to stick around any longer than I had to. So I got off the bus, and Riley was two steps behind me. I was pretty sure when where we were about a mile from Surrey Street. The road we're on didn't have sidewalks, but there weren't any safety patrols for there this far out, so we walked on the street. 5 minutes later, we heard angry voices. It was a bunch of really street kids, and they were coming straight for us. First, those idiots lied about me throwing the snowball on the bus. Then they believed the lie, and now they were mad. Me and Riley had to make a choice. We could either deal with the mob or run. We decided to run, and the only place to go was into the woods. Believe me, that was the last thing I wanted to do. Everyone knows the woods along the road are where the goat man lives, which is why no one ever goes there. Roderick was the first one to tell me about the goat man, who had said was a half man, half goat. I was sure if he meant the top half was goat and the bottom part was man, or if it was the other way around. But either way, the goat man seemed pretty scary to me. Me and Riley have argued for years over which version is right. Riley thinks the goat man is split down the middle. I guess Riley could be right, but if you ask me, I think his version sounds kind of stupid. It's it's fun talking about that stuff when you're on a sleepover and safe in your sleeping bags, but now that we were in the woods where the goat man actually lives, it was no laughing matter. The Raleigh Street kids must have known about the goat man too, because when we went into the woods, they didn't follow us. I figured they'd stay in there just long enough for the Raleigh Street kids to leave, because we didn't want to be in there no longer than we had to. But those guys must have known we were chicken to stay in there for long, and we could see them waiting for us on the road on the edge of the woods. So our only choice was to go deeper in, and that's what we did. What was weird was how quiet it was in there. After a while, I realized we couldn't hear the cars on the road, and that's when I knew we went in too deep. We followed our footsteps back to the road, but the sun was going down and it was getting hard to find our tracks. We picked up the pace because we didn't want to get stuck in the woods in the dark, but when we came across a set of tracks, we froze. At first, we thought it was the goat man, But then we realized there was two sets of footprints, and they were ours, and they were meant. We'd spent the past 10 minutes walking in a giant circle. So we turned around and headed to the other direction, but then we ran into a creek and we knew we were lost. Raleigh was in a panic, but I wasn't. I knew that if I get lost in the wilderness, as long as you have water, you're fine. I saw a movie where the explorers got trapped in the mountains, but they found a spring and it kept them alive. But then I remembered that when they got desperate, they had to eat their pack animals. I just hope things didn't reach that point for us. I figured if we followed the creek, it might lead us somewhere, and at least we wouldn't get lost again. But when we came across a beaver dam, Riley started freaking out. Riley said beavers are dangerous and that he saw a show on the TV where a beaver attacked a person. Riley is an idiot. The show he was talking about was a cartoon, and I was actually with him when he watched it. So I couldn't convince Riley to stay near the creek, so we had to turn around again. And by now it was really dark. After walking a few more minutes, something bright caught my eye. I thought maybe it was the headlights from a car, and we ran toward it. It turned out the light was coming from a car, but it was just a rusted out piece of junk in the middle of the woods, and what caught my eye was the reflection of the moon in the bumper. When my eyes adjusted to the light, I realized there was a lot of abandoned cars and trucks around us. I saw something shiny sitting in on a stump, and I picked it up. The thing was cold and metal, and when I held it up to my face to take a closer look, I knew exactly what it was. It was a belt buckle, and it belonged to Meckley Mingo. That meant me and Raleigh were smack in the middle of Mingo's camp. People in my town have always wondered where the Mingos lived, and now me and Raleigh had stumbled into their headquarters. I thought we were lucky because at least there was no one there, but when I turned to leave, something grabbed my hand. Well, technically, something grabbed Mr. Morrow's hand. I thought for sure it was Meckley Mingo, and he was going to kill me for touching his belt buckle. Thankfully, was wrong. A puppet was snagged on the track store handle, so I tried to pull it free. That's when I heard noises coming from inside the truck. I realized I had to choose between saving myself and saving a puppet, and it was no contest. Me and Riley tore out of there, but when we were a good distance away from the Mingos camp, we heard a sound that made my blood run cold. I didn't know if it was Goatman or the Mingos kids. All I knew for sure was that it was if we stopped running, we'd be dead. I could hear shouting behind us, and it was getting closer. But just when I felt like voices were right on top of us, we broke through trees and into the open. Luckily, Dad was paying attention, or me and Raleigh would have been roadkill. But at least it would have been over quick because El Domingos caught us. I'm sure they've taken their time. When I woke up this morning, I was totally exhausted. My legs felt like rubber from the running yesterday, and I barely got any rest because I had a nightmare. The Mingos were chasing me. I was gonna tell Mom I couldn't go to school today, but when I looked up out the window, I realized I didn't have to. It snowed at least 5 inches overnight, which meant school was closed. So I was looking forward to a nice, relaxing day of doing absolutely nothing. Mom and Dad were already gone, and Manny was at daycare. Rajek usually sleeps past 1 p.m. on snow days, so I more or less had the whole house to myself. I went downstairs to make a bowl of cereal and turn on the TV, but there was something wrong with the remote. I noticed it felt a little light, so I opened up the back of the remote to see if there was a missing battery. It turns out there weren't any batteries inside, but there was a note from Mom to get the batteries for the remote low dishwasher. I really didn't feel like doing the chores on the snow day, so I looked around the house for some batteries I could put in the remote. But Mom must have known I'd do that because there wasn't a spare battery anywhere. I couldn't figure out how Mom was gonna know I loaded the dishwasher since she wasn't even home. But when I put the last plate on the and shut the door, I found something. It was another note with a battery taped to it. Congratulations, clean the downstairs bathroom and get to your next battery. I didn't like where this was heading. The TV remote takes 4 batteries, and at this rate, I was gonna burn through my whole day doing chores. But then I realized I didn't have to. The remote in Mom and Dad's bedroom is really skinny, and I was pretty sure it took 1 battery. And it turned out I was right. I knew I was gonna have to finish all the chores before Mom and Dad got home, but I figured I had plenty of time. I deserved to enjoy myself a little while, so I made myself comfortable on their bed and turned on the TV. Ordinarily, I get a little weirded out being in Mom and Dad's bed, but today I decided to make an exception, especially when I realized their blankets was the one I got from Aunt Dorothy for Christmas. Watching TV in bed was awesome, or at least for a while. I was comfortable for the first 2 hours, but after my neck started hurting from laying in that position, I've already decided that when I get a place of my own, I'm gonna attach my TV to the ceiling so I can look straight up at it. But I'm gonna have someone install a TV who knows what they're doing, because I don't need to be the next Flat Stanley. I must doze off for a while, because when the phone rang, it started startling me. It was my mom, and I thought she was checking on me to see if I'd finished my chores. But the reason she was calling was to tell me she couldn't make it home in time to pick up Manny at the daycare, so she was gonna have Mrs. Drummond drop Manny off at the house. That meant I had to babysit, which was gonna really mess up the rest of my day. When Mrs. Drummond dropped off Manny a half hour later, I didn't know what to do with him. I put Manny on Mom and Dad's room, turned on some cartoons, but he followed me back downstairs, so I guess Manny just wanted to be with me. I tried to remember what Roderick used to do with me when I was little, but I couldn't think of what was the time he gave me lemon juice and told me it was soda. Then I remembered a game me and Roderick used to play that was actually fun. We pretended the floor was lava, and he had to stay off of it by using cushions and pillows from the couch. Me and Roderick used to play that game for hours. I figured if I got Manny started, he could keep himself entertained while I wrapped up my chores. But when I told Manny how the game worked, he totally freaked out. So now Manny wouldn't go anywhere near the floor, and that made things really inconvenient for me. But I still had to do my chores or I'd be in trouble when mom and dad got home. And I had a big one in front of me, which was shoveling the driveway. I knew Manny would have a total meltdown if I left him inside with all the lava, so I got him dressed in his snow gear, which wasn't easy. I figured Manny could play on the back deck while I shoveled the driveway, and he'd be safe because the deck is closed in. The snow in the driveway was wet and heavy, and it was hard to make any progress. After a half hour, I decided to take a break and soak my hands in some warm water. While I was inside, I thought to check and see how Manny was doing on the back deck. Manny was gone, and he had built a little staircase out of snow to escape. Thankfully, he didn't get far, but I realized I couldn't have him alone anymore. I took Manny in front of the yard with me. It was getting late, and Dad gets really mad when the driveway is not cleared when he comes home from work. So I shoveled it as fast as I could, and Manny pitched in to help. But there was just too much snow and not enough time. I was ready to give up when some girls from a different neighborhood walked by and offered to clear our driveway for $10. These kids look young, and I didn't see how they could do anything any better than me and Manny, but we could use all the help we could get, so I was willing to give them a chance. I had $5 in the jar next to my bed, and I had got the other five from the big jar of the change Manny has in his room. But what I didn't realize when I agreed to the deal with the girls was that they had a snowblower. So they were done clearing the whole driveway inside of 5 minutes. I felt like I was getting ripped off, so I told them I paid them $3 instead of 10. But I guess this wasn't the first time someone tried to stiff them on the payment. They moved the snow back into the driveway and added the snow from the front lawn just to make a point. By the time my parents got home, things were worse off than when I started. After dinner, mom and dad lectured me until about 8 o'clock for not finishing my chores, and that's when Roger got out of bed to start his day. I usually sleep in on the weekends, but this morning, Mom had other plans for me. She said I was going to spend the whole day outside. I told her I'd go in the snow after I played some video games, but she reminded me about screen-free weekends, and I knew she wasn't gonna budge. When I was younger, I could spend hours playing in the snow, but nowadays, after about 10 minutes, I'm ready to come inside. Grown-ups act like being in the snow is the most fun you can ever have, but you never see them out there rolling around in it. I can only remember one time Dad played with us out in the snow, but that ended the second Roderick dumped snow down the back of Dad's neck. Mom's always making us kids go outside because she says we need our vitamin D, which you get from the sun. I tell Mom I get plenty of vitamin D from the sun in my video games, but that kind of reasoning never works on her. When I went outside today, Manny was already in the front yard making snowman, or whatever you call those things. We never finished raking the lawn in the fall, so Manny used the leaves we didn't pick up to decorate his snow friends. Manny had use up most of the snow in the yard, so there wasn't a whole lot I could even do outside. I decided to head up to Raleigh's, which meant I had to pass by Fregley's house, and sure enough, he was out in his front yard. The reason I went to Raleigh's was because his family just got heated floors, so on cold days I tried spending as much time at his house as possible. But Mom must have known I was gonna go to Raleigh's because she called his parents and he was outside when I got there. As long as we both had to be outdoors, I figured we should make the most of it. Since I already done all the hard work of getting up the hill, I told Raleigh we should get a little sledding. The plow usually comes through by late morning, so we can only get a few good runs before the street is cleared. But the regular plow guy was on vacation, and the kids at the top of the hill told the substitute driver the Surrey Street was 2 miles down the road, so that bought us some extra time. I don't actually think it's a good idea to mess around with substitutes because it always comes back to bite you. Last year, we had a long-term sub in algebra, and on his first day, me and my classmates all switched seats with each other because we knew the sub wouldn't rely on the seat chart. I gotta say, it was pretty hilarious having him call us by the wrong names every day. But when the kid pretended to be me, starting acting like a total jerk, it wasn't so funny anymore. And when a real teacher got back, the sub gave her a write up and on the fake Greg Halfie, which landed me in detention for 2 weeks. Rowley only has one sled, but there's just enough room on it for 2 people. We squeezed on board and pointed it downhill. But when all that weight, we couldn't really get any molten. When we got close to the bottom of the hill, we came to a dead stop. But that was probably a good thing because the kids who made it all the way down, got narrowed by the lower Surrey Street kids when they crossed into the territory. Things could have gotten a lot uglier, but then the substitute snowplow driver figured out where Surrey Street was, and that was the end of that. I decided we had to been outside long enough, and we tried going inside, but Mom had locked the door, and I couldn't tell she was messing around. Since we couldn't sled anymore, we needed to figure out something else to do, so me and Riley went to an empty lot a few doors down from the house to decide what to do next. I figured as long as we had to be outside, we might as well stay warm. At school, we watched a movie about people in the Arctic who built igloos to survive in the cold weather, and I thought maybe we could give it a try. We made some snow bricks and stacked them way the people in the movie did, and it was hard at first, but then we started getting the hang of it. The main thing was getting the shape of the dome just the right so it didn't collapse. We were really careful and everything held together, but when we put the last brick at the top, we realized we forgot to build a door. Raleigh started hibernating and hyperventilating, and I knew if I didn't do something, he was gonna suck up all the oxygen in there. So I busted through the top and took a big gulp of fresh air. Some neighborhood kids had been watching us build our igloo, and with my head sticking up, I must have looked like an easy target. After those idiots ran out of snowballs, they climbed on the top of the igloo. but it wasn't meant to support any extra weight, and within a few seconds the whole thing crashing down. Me and Riley were lucky to crawl out there alive. Once we pulled ourselves out of the ruined igloo, I decided that we had enough fun for one day, so we went back to the house, and this time Mom let us in. I told Mom what happened at the empty lot and how she needed to go out there and yell at those stupid kids for us. But Mom said that learning to deal with the conflict is part of growing up, and that me and Riley were gonna have to deal with this on our own. I didn't like the sound of that. I thought I thought the whole point of having parents is that you get someone to solve your problems for you. That was listening from the other room had totally a different take. He said that the neighborhood kids had just declared war on me and Rowley, and if we didn't fight back, they'd think it was okay to attack whenever they wanted. Dad said that when he was growing up, his neighborhood turned into a battlefield every time it snowed. Kids built giant snow forts and had epic snowball fights, and everyone was a part of a different clan. Dad said each clan had its own flag, and when it's captured somebody else's fort, you planted a flag to mark your territory. Well, Raleigh thought we should warn a clan. He really liked the flag idea. I thought it seemed like kind of dumb, but as long as making a flag gave us an excuse to be indoors for a while, I was all for it. We found an old pillowcase in the laundry room and got some markers out of the junk drawer in the kitchen. We started trying to come up with a name for our clan. Riley said he wanted it to be the Hufflepuff, but I said if we were gonna do this, I wanted the name to be something original. We argued back and forth for a while about a name, and I realized we we weren't gonna argue on one, agree on one. So we talked about how our flag should look. Riley wanted our symbol to be a wolf, but I wanted something even fierce than that, so we scared kids off. I thought a bloody battle axe would do the trick, but of course, Riley didn't like the idea, so we compromised and put the two things together. But when you add an axe and a wolf, you just get dead wolf, which isn't gonna scare anyone. We were going to start over and make a new flag, but when I got another pillowcase, my mom told us we needed to go back outside, so we got on our snow gear and went to the empty lot. The kids who wrecked our igloo had moved on to other things, so me and Riley had the empty lot to ourselves. We used the snow from the igloo as starting point and made a fort that could hold up an attack. After we finished, we planted our flag on top of the wall and waited. I figured our fort might attract some attention, but I didn't realize just how much. Within a few minutes, we had kids coming at us from every direction. We were completely outgunned, and when the kids rushed our fort, we had to abandon it. When we got back to the house, we told Dad what happened, but after we described our fort to him, he said we did everything all wrong. He he said we needed to build our fort on high ground so we could drive back our enemies. Then Dad launched into a big history lesson, castle warfare, and all things that people do to defend themselves back from the medieval times. The stuff they did in the old days was totally brutal, and here's just an example. When invaders tried to climb the walls of a castle, people inside would pour boiling oil on them. I hope it doesn't get to that level in our neighborhood battles, but tonight I added an item to Mom's groceries list just in case it does. It must have snowed another 7 inches last night, and the street was totally covered when I woke up. I couldn't even see the line between the yard and the road. I was kind of surprised the plow hadn't come yet because when there's this much snow, people can't even get their cars out of their driveways. But when Dad came back from his morning walk, I found out what was going on. Dad said when the plow tried to get up the hill, it got stuck, and when the snowplow driver got ambushed by the neighborhood kids, he ran off and left the truck sitting in the street. That meant we could sled all day if we wanted to, but sledding is for kids, and I had other plans in mind. I've been up all night looking through Dad's books to learn everything I could about castle warfare and the battle strategies, and by the morning I was ready. I wanted to get started on making a fort with rally right away, but I knew that the second we put our walls, we were going to be under attack. The only way we could fight back was if we had ammunition. I figured we could buy a big supply of pre-made snowballs from Mitchell Pickett. So we went down to his shed, which was open for business, but I guess things must have gone well for Mitchell last winter because this year he expanded his operations. I borrowed enough money from Manny's change jar to pay for 3 dozen snowballs, but now that I saw all the other stuff, I had to make some tough choices. The sloppy specials look like regular snowballs to me, so I asked Mitchell why they were 5 times more expensive. He said that each one was regular snowballs slush on the inside, and don't even ask me how he pulled that off. We ended up buying 2 dozen pre-made snowballs and the one snowball launcher, which I figured we could use if we needed to nail somebody from a long distance. But I wish I brought the whole jar of change because Mitchell was selling a snowball cap that looked like it could really do some damage. I had I have to get that another time, though. We loaded up my sled with our purchases and went back to the empty lot. But when we got closer, we were shocked by what we saw. There was a bunch of snow forts in the empty lot now, and there were kids inside each one. These kids copied our idea, fight right down to the flags. The Marley sisters had a spear on their flag, and Evelyn Trimble had a bat on hers. The Garza twins had a two-headed auger, which actually looked pretty cool. There were some really lame flags too. Markini's dad owned the sub shop in the center of town that went out of business, and Marcus used the flag that used to hang on the front of the restaurant. I wanted to get closer to see who else made their fort, but when we got near the empty lot, Ernesto, Gabriel, and a bunch of other kids opened fire up on us. The lot was totally overcrowded, and I knew there was no way we could build a snow fort there now, so our only chance was to take over someone else's. I got some old binoculars from the garage so we could scope things out with having to get too close. Things had gotten a lot crazier in the 5 minutes we were gone, though. Gabriel and Ernesto were in the battle with Marley sisters and a bunch of school kids were battling with the Garza twins. Emilia Greenwell and Evelyn Trimble had teamed up to fight Anthony Dinard and Sheldon Rez, and speed up bumps on Lectria hooks were straight up going at it with their fists. But I wasn't focused on all that. I was searching for a fort that looked vulnerable, and I found one. The duplex kids had built a pretty solid looking fort, but as usual, it looked like they were getting along. I figured they were themselves out fighting, and when they did, me and Raleigh could pounce. So we moved in a little closer and waited for the right moment. That's when I noticed a fort that didn't have anyone in it. The fort was sitting all alone on top of a big mound of snow. I remember what Dad said about the high ground, and this fort was the perfect spot. I couldn't figure out why someone would build a fort and abandon it, but I knew this was our big chance, so we snuck around it and climbed over the back wall. It turned out the fort wasn't empty, though it belonged to baby Gibson, who was inside with a stockpile of snowballs. But the second we stopped in the fort, it was under attack. The homeschooled kids must have known about the high ground thing too, and now they wanted the fort for themselves. But when they came charging up the mountain, we drove them back, and even baby Gibson got in on the act. Then the kids started coming for us from every direction, and it was getting harder and harder to defend the fort. Duplex kids split into the groups, and they came at us from the left and the right, while Ernesto and Gabrielle started using snowball throwers to snipe at us from their fort. And while we were trying to deal with all that, some little kid from Mrs. Jennings' playground tunneled up through the bottom of the fort and totally took us off guard. The next thing we knew, our fort was totally infested with preschoolers, and uh, to cap it all off, the Marley sisters did a sneak attack from the rear, which was terrifying because those girls go for the eyes. Me and Riley got driven out of the fort and onto the open battlefield where it was just total mayhem. Everyone was fighting everyone else, and any sense of order was just gone. Then something happened that made everyone stop. Joe Rocky got hit in the mouth with an ice ball, and it lost a couple teeth. In the neighborhood, ice balls are on the ban list in snowball fights, so when somebody crossed the line, everybody knew things had to gone too far. Representatives from the clans had meetings in their center of the empty lot to settle on the rules. Everyone agreed that ice balls were off limits, and so was yellow snow. He came up with a bunch of other rules too, like how it's not okay to stuff snow in someone's hat and then put it back in their head. Once we agreed on everything, we were ready for the next round of battle. But while we were doing all that talking, we didn't notice what was happening right behind us. The lower Surrey Street kids had snuck up to the top of the hill with their sleds, and by then there was nothing we could do to stop them. Now, if there was one thing that unites us hill kids, it's when the kids from the bottom of the hill, they try to take what's ours. We don't have much, but we have the hill, and no one's gonna take that from us. As long as the plow was stuck, we knew the guys were just gonna keep coming. So we decided to do something about it. The only way to keep the lower Surrey kids from coming back up the hill was to build a wall to block their path, and we didn't want to build some punny wall that they could just push over either. We wanted something that was solid, but we needed to make it fast because those guys were already marching back up the hill with their sleds. So we got recycling bins from some nearby houses and started building. We made it a double wall, so if anyone broke through the first layer, they still have to deal with the second one. And we stockpiled a ton of snowballs. We weren't gonna be able to get boiling oil, so I sent Raleigh up to his house to fill some thermos with hot chocolate. The hot the homeschool kids went out and collected icicles to to stick into the wall, and the duplex kids grouped together some snowmen to make it seem like there were more of us than there actually were. And the lower Surrey street kids came back. We were ready for them. When these guys saw our wall, they didn't know what to do. And when they got closer, we hit them with everything we had. Those guys didn't stand a chance. We sent them running back down the hill, and we celebrated our victory. But we celebrated too soon. 10 minutes later, the lower Surrey street kids were back, and this time they were armed to the teeth. Most of them were wearing sports gear to protect themselves from our snowballs. And the moment I knew this wasn't going to be an easy fight was when one of them threw a hockey stick. But still, we were the ones with the wall, and we had to have the higher ground. So we unleashed another round of snowballs. We held them off for a while, but those guys had some surprises up their sleeves. They hit us with a round of sloppy specials, which we're totally unprepared for. If the lower Surrey street kids had sloppy specials, that meant Mitchell Pickett was playing both sides. But we'd have to deal with him later because now we had a new problem. It turned out sloppy specials weren't just the distraction to draw our attention away from the next wave of attack, which was coming at us fast. We hit the kids carrying ladders with snowballs, but before we knew it, they planted their ladders at the base of the wall and had started climbing down their way up. But Riley came back with the hot chocolate just in the nick of time. We emptied the thermos out on the kids scaling the wall. Unfortunately, Riley hadn't added any water to the hot chocolate mix, so all it did was annoy them. I thought those guys were about to take control of the wall, but then Latricia hooks and speed bump saved the day by dumping trash cans full of slush on them. We didn't have a second to celebrate, though, because the lower Surrey street kids were already launching their next attack. Half the fifth grade football team live at the bottom of the hill, and they tried to take down the wall with brutal force. But the wall held up, and those guys were themselves out with the effort. By now, everyone was tired. The sun was out and it was actually starting to get warm. I really wish I hadn't worn any thermal underwear because I was roasting with extra layers. The lower street kids kept coming at us and we kept driving them back. And after a while, nobody had the energy to keep fighting. Finally, the other team turned around and went back home. At first, we thought that meant we had won, but the guys weren't giving up. They were just refilling. By now, it was lunchtime, and the kids at the bottom of the hill came back outside with sandwiches and snacks. And when some kids started handing out juice boxes, it was a little hard to watch. We we were all pretty thirsty on the wall, and it was getting hotter, only getting hotter. Some kids started sucking on the snowballs to stay hydrated, and they got through half of our stockpile before the rest of us realized what happened. We did an inventory of what we had left, and we knew we had enough to fight off a major assault. So we split our remaining snowballs into thirds and put Anthony Bernard in charge of protecting them. We kept waiting for the next attack from the lower street kids, but it never came. After a while, we realized their strategy was to wait us out until we crack and then take our wall without a fight. Purvis Gentry was the first one on our side to break. He hadn't even hadn't even had breakfast this morning, so he saw off all the sandwiches crust lying on the ground made him crazy. He climbed over the wall and ran down the hill, and that was the last of any of us saw him. But the rest of the hill kids kept it together. 3 hours went by, but the lower street kids weren't budging. In fact, they looked like they were settling for the night. A few of them strong extension cords to their houses, so now they had electricity, and we could see the glow from the TV sets from where they were. Things were going from bad to worse on the wall, and a lot of younger kids were tired and hungry and wanted to go home. And I couldn't blame them because by now it was dinner time. Jacob Hoff said he was supposed to have clarinet lesson at 6 o'clock, and if he missed it, his parents would be mad, and the rest of us could understand that kind of thing. Jacob's house was just a few doors down, and we told him if he made a run for it, we'd give him cover. He promised that the second his clarinet lesson was over, he'd be back to the wall with his coat pockets stuffed with granola bars and fruit chews. That got everyone pretty excited, and we helped Jacob over the wall. Sure enough, as soon as he touched down the other side, the lower street kids opened fire on him, but we fired back and got Jacob to his front door safely. It turned out it was a wasted effort through the thing about the clarinet lesson was just an excuse to go home. And when we saw Jacob in his bedroom window, he knew he was never coming back with those snacks. After that, the mood inside the wall was really grim. Some kids were crying and didn't see how we could hold out much longer. The lower street kids must have known they had us on the ropes, because that's when they launched paper airplanes into the fort with notes written on them. That was too much for some kids to take. Even Baby Gibson seemed shaken up. So I guess now we know he can read. A few minutes later, a kid came running toward us from between a couple of houses to the right of our fort, and we got ready to pelt with him with a round of snowballs, but somebody recognized the kid, and we held out our fire. It was Trevor Nix, who used to live in the hill. Trevor was out of breath and he could barely get to his words out, so we pulled him up onto the wall and waited for him to calm down. After Trevor got himself together, he told us what was going on. He said the Lower Church Street kids had been holding him captive, but he managed to escape. Trevor said those guys were planning something really bad and he wanted to tell us before it was too late. He said the Lower Street kids were creating a huge stockpile of snowballs, and when it got dark, they were gonna launch a full-scale attack, but that wasn't even the worst part. Those guys were making the snowballs in the gunman's yard, and that place is with the dogs, so that meant they were using yellow snow and who knows what else. Everyone was pretty mad about what the Lower Street kids were planning, but we were glad Trevor gave us the heads up. We told him that from now on he could sled on our hill anytime. We agreed we couldn't just sit there and wait for the attack, so we started walking on a plane, working on a plan. Half of us would sneak down the hill and launch a surprise attack on the kids, making the snowballs in the gunmen's yards. The other half would stay back to protect the fort. We sketched the plan into the snow with a stick to make sure we are all on the same page. Me and Riley wanted to be part of the action, so we chose to be on the sneak attack team. Our group loaded up a few sleds with all the snowballs we had left, and we slipped over the back wall in between some houses. It was getting dark now, so we knew those guys wouldn't be able to see us coming. When we got to the gunman's backyard, we stopped to scope out the scene. Sure enough, there was a big group of kids making snowballs out front behind a rock wall. When Baby Gibson gave the signal, we launched our attack, but the other guys didn't even flinch when we hit them, and it was we got close. As we got closer, we realized it was all just a trick. The Lower Surrey Street kids had created decoys to split us up, which meant we'd been double-crossed by Trevor next. We rushed back to the wall, but then it was already too late. The wall was in the ruins, and we were out of ammo. It looked really bad for us hill kids, but then something happened that gave us hope. A group of kids was marching up the hill toward us, and when they got closer, I realized it was the safety patrols. For a brief second, I thought they were there to save us, but they weren't there to help anyone. They were there for revenge. Usually the safety patrols aren't allowed to throw snowballs, but today was a Sunday, and that meant they were free to do whatever they wanted. Half of the girls on the safety patrols are the softball team, and anyone who says the girls can't throw hard doesn't know what they're talking about. The battle turned into the Surrey Street kids versus the safety patrols, and we outnumbered them 2-1. But the half of the girls on the street switched sides, and it got really confusing. In the middle of this, another group came down from the top of the hill, and it was really street kids who must have gotten kicked off the golf course and came to the sled on our street. And once they got into the mix, it was just a total free for all. Just when things couldn't get crazier, a terrifying sound cut through the air, and everyone stopped to figure out what it was. The only ones in the street who knew for sure were me and Raleigh. Then the Mingo kids started pouring out of the woods, looking like they just got woken up from a 3-month nap. The last Mingo to emerge was Meckley. He was carrying something on the top of his stick, and first I couldn't tell what it was, but it was closer, and I realized it was Mr. Morals. Meckley wasn't wearing his belt, which I thought was strange, but seeing that it made me remember something. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out something cold and metal. When me and Raleigh were in the Mingos camp, I must have pulled out the belt buckle in my pocket without even realizing it, and now I was in panic because that meant Meckley Mingo was coming for me. But the only thing kids in my town hate more than each other is the Mingos. So when Mingos charge, everyone turns to face them. Well, everyone except me at that point had enough. Well, when the Mingos came out, I looked for a good place to hide. There was a big hole in a collapsed section of the wall, so I dove inside, and Raleigh was right behind me. The battle raged all around us, and I didn't see how we were going to get out of this one alive. Raleigh didn't think of where we were gonna make it either. He told me that if I survived, but he didn't. I could have all his video games. I patted myself down to see if I had a pen so I could put that in a writing, but all I had on me was that stupid belt buckle. If it didn't matter anyway, because 5 seconds later the ground started shaking and it felt like we were in an earthquake. I thought we were going to be buried alive, and all I could think of is how the two of us were going to end up in a museum after they dug us out of the couple thousand years. But then the ground stopped shaking, and after a few seconds, we popped our heads out of the hiding spot to see what happened. The snowplow was 3/4 of the way up the street, mowing through everything in its path, and I didn't know if the snowplower driver couldn't see the kids in the road or just didn't care. By now, the snow was melting, and everyone was turning to slush. And once the plow left our street, it was quiet. The crazy thing is, now that the street was plowed, there wasn't really anything left to fight over, so everyone picked up themselves and went back home. Even Mingo kids went back where they came from. And the truth is, I didn't really remember that we were all fighting over to begin with. We've been back at school for a week, and it's warmed up a lot in the past few days. I don't want to curse it or anything, but I think might have seen the last cold weather, so I'm not really worried about the pig anymore. In fact, he's probably somewhere warm by now, having the time of his life. There's still some snow on the ground in my neighborhood, and so Mitchell Pickett's been enjoying the snowmobile he bought with all the money he made this winter. So anybody who says that war doesn't pay should think again. Mitchell's not the only one who made out, though. Trevor Nix has been playing hockey down at the bottom of the hill with the lower street kids every day after school. So I guess now that's what you get for being a traitor. But I'm not gonna complain. I'm just glad I made it through the winter without getting myself killed. The thing I learned about myself is that I'm just not the hero type. Trust me, I'm glad there's people like that out there, but the world needs guys like me too, because if human beings are still around 500 million years from now, it's going to be thanks to the Greg Huffleys of the world who figure out ways to survive.